We do thank you for joining us today. This is the third in our webinar series. Our next webinar is on metals, and then we've got one where we're going to look at other items and emerging markets as we'll wrap up in our October session. And in November, we will let you know when we have our also online annual meeting where we will have a longer dive into things that are going on in our industry. This webinar is recorded and we'll have that available for you by Friday. So next week you'll be able to pick up and follow up on anything you may need to see there. Everyone is muted. Please use the question box to send questions in to the moderator. The chat box is there for you to talk with the other participants, but we'd like to get the questions you want for the moderator will be in the question box, and that's what will be monitored there that we'll be responding to. Please note if you have some audio issues, but you're still connected, you can see in your email invite that you got reminding you to log in, there is a call-in number and code that you can use to get the audio portion back if something should fail. Our webinar series has run at this hour for the last two and will for the final, but next month we have to accommodate one of our special speakers, we will be moving on September 1st to a 1 o'clock time slot. So we made that change after the agenda or the calendar item was promulgated when you registered, and on some people's computers those don't update, so please check to see if that your calendar has moved our September 1 to the 1 o'clock hour. SERDC wants to thank its sponsors that make our work possible. Certainly as we continue our mission to bring government and industry together to promote sustainable recycling, we couldn't do this without the support of those sponsors. Please take note, and if you can do anything to further their cause, we do appreciate it. Like I said, our mission is to work to make our industry work better. We have our vision listed there. I'll let you get that later so you don't have to listen to my sales pitch. We will then move on into thanking the sponsors for this webinar series, ISRI and MachineX. We've got a short message from each of them. They allowed us to put the series on without having to charge admission for you, the participants, so we all owe an appreciation to them, and we've got a short word from each of you. Jen will run. I hope.
Hello, I'm Robin Weiner, the president of ISRI. ISRI is very proud to partner with SERDC and others participating in this webinar series to showcase how the recycling industry has adapted to meet numerous unexpected global challenges while continuing to provide essential infrastructure and products needed in our everyday lives. ISRI looks forward to working with each of you to continue advancing the recycling industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving in now into our exploration of where the glass markets are, how we're adopting to changes in markets, particularly as the pandemic has influenced it, but overall, where do we see our industry moving? And I'm pleased that we have Scott DeFife, the president of the Glass Packaging Institute, who wears several hats with the Glass Recycling Coalition and the Glass Recycling Foundation, all working together to improve this material group within our industry. Scott, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you very much, Will, and we're very happy to be here and happy to participate in this SERDC webinar on glass recycling and glass markets. I'm going to just move through a little bit of a summary very quickly to start things off, and then we'll get to the rest of our panelists and leave some time for a Q&A at the end. The Glass Packaging Institute is the trade association representing the North American glass container manufacturing industry and our entire supply chain. So all of the inputs that go into and the raw materials that go into making glass in the first place, but then once the glass comes out of the plant and gets into the market, caps, closures, packaging, transport, and glass recycling are all members of GPI. As Will mentioned, I'm also on the leadership committee for the Glass Recycling Coalition and also serve as the president of the Glass Recycling Foundation. So in any given webinar, I can answer questions from, with 3 different hats on. But let me start off with the Glass Packaging Institute. Last year during our pandemic time, locked down and not able to travel, we embarked upon a roadmap to figure out how to get the glass recycling industry and the glass packaging industry use of recycled content up to 50% by the end of the decade. There's been a strong interest in moving forward with higher recycled content brands, and the glass packaging industry's customers, the folks that use the glass to put their products in, mostly food and beverage, are looking for more sustainable packaging, higher recycled content to meet their own corporate ESG goals and their sustainability mission. To do that, as an industry, the industry members have committed to a 50% recycling rate and a 50% recycled content rate over the course of the next decade. In addition, this matches the US EPA's goals for all material recycling, and that will be coming out this later this summer or fall. The EPA will be announcing a roadmap itself for how to get the entire country's recycling rates up to 50%. But we thought we needed to study how to get this done for the glass industry and to throw out a roadmap for how we could actually get that material back into container plants. And we don't mean this for container plants versus other end markets. The way that the glass industry, the glass container industry views this is that a rising tide lifts all ships. More material coming back into the supply chain and going through processing will ultimately serve to increase the availability of glass for all end markets for recycled glass cullet. It is an ambitious goal, but we think it can be done. One of the key ways to start any journey is to know where you're starting from and to where you're trying to end up. And where we're starting from right now is a bit hit and miss across the country in terms of the glass recycling rates in different regions of the United States. Certainly, the bottle bill states have higher recycled content overall and higher recycling rates overall, and you can see that, with a variability on this chart here. For bottle bill states, glass recycling is up to 63% on average, with Oregon being the highest, and the average recycling rate across the country about 32% for glass, and the non-bottle bill states lower. More to the point, there are several states where we have significant presence for the glass industry, not just glass containers, but fiberglass in the Southeast, where we're in the teens in terms of glass recovery rates, or even single digits in some of the Great Lakes states for glass recovery rates. And so our work is to try to really increase the availability of material getting to plants in those regions with high concentration of plants. We can move forward. There's variable, all of you in the audience, I'm sure, have some sort of view on the barriers to getting more glass into the supply chain. Consumer incentives, landfill tip fee competition, a lack of processing capacity, transportation issues. There's a variety of different barriers and gaps in the chain that we identified in our study, and our work is to address each one of these going forward. Move forward. Right now in 2021 and 2022, these are the priority areas that we're working. This is a 10-year plan, but we need to start somewhere. So we're really working on some innovative financing operations, cleaner residential streams, expanded commercial recycling. Really, we're talking about bar and restaurant glass, and expanding reach and access to processing, and some statewide policies that will lay the foundation for more action over the course of the coming years. I always like to start with a map of the US glass infrastructure to remind everybody that there are plenty of glass markets across the United States, and we can focus on the Southeast. There are glass manufacturing plants, there is glass recycling processing, there are MRFs that accept glass, and then there are those red stars that you see on that map, and a couple of the folks that are associated with those red stars will be speaking on the panel today. Those are GRC certified MRFs, and the Glass Recycling Coalition is GRC, and we used the ISRI standards to create a glass recycling certification program that will rate the material that's coming out of the MRF process as gold, silver, and bronze. And using that certification program means that the material has the quality level that should have market value and be able to be delivered to the rest of the supply chain in a good manner, so that it can be used in remanufacture. That is not to say that MRFs that don't have the certification cannot do that. Certainly they can, but if you have the GRC certified MRF, you know that the material has market value coming out of that. And you can see, we're adding to GRC certification over the every quarter, and we're going to explain in this webinar what it takes to get through GRC certification and answer some of your questions about that as well. In addition to in all of our studies at GPI, we've handled a variety of different questions on webinars. We started to take notes on the most commonly asked questions, and really the work that we needed to do to educate policymakers and municipalities on the basics of glass recycling. The variety of different collection mechanisms, the different pressure points within the operations, administration, contracting, processing, and the like. And these materials are up on our website, which is gpi.org, and are open and available for download to anyone. But before we get started on almost any talk about glass and glass recycling, we really need to talk about quality. Quality matters a great deal. And I think that quality in the glass recycling system and the market value of glass is misunderstood. If you just merely are looking up a price on a website like recyclingmarkets.net or something like that, really, what are they talking about when we're talking about the value of glass? And on one side, you have a typical picture of MRF glass, which we know that picture is 50 to 60% glass by volume and weight in there. We were hard pressed to see any glass in there. I see a lot of other plastic caps and straws and cans and things of that nature, versus clean drop-off glass material in the other picture, where you can clearly see that those are glass bottles, right? So the quality of the glass coming out of the MRF, or the quality of the material that's being delivered to processing, makes a great deal of difference into the value that's going along with it. The glass has value. It's the contamination that comes along with it that is taking the value of that material down, because if we have to haul a ton of material in the picture on the left to markets, 50% of that may come out as residual contamination, and then it needs to be dealt with as well. And so this is something to keep in mind whenever we're talking about market prices and value throughout the rest of the conversation today. And one of the other key issues that I wanted to bring up, especially for our conversations in the Southeast, is where does that material go? Where is glass going? This is a material flow study from a few years ago that is looking at non-bottle bill states. So this is, largely representative of an average snapshot into the Southeast region, where virtually 45% of the glass is going directly to landfill from consumers directly to landfill. And then when you add in the material that comes back out through the processing system, that material that can get to processing, the landfill cover and ADC, you get up to 2/3 of the glass ends up not being recycled on average today. When the material does go through processing, collection and processing, some of that can get back into glass containers and packaging other durable goods such as fiberglass or aggregate and mineral replacement. But largely, we're starting out at a deficit. It does give us hope though, because the material is out there. The material that we need as an industry to reach our goals, to double the amount of recycled content in the average bottles exists. We just need to get our hands on it and keep it out of landfills. Lastly, I want to point out a couple other websites. Glassrecycles.org is the GRC website. On here is a lot of information, education, talking points, maps for end markets, details on the MRF certification program, and best practices. In addition, the Glass Recycling Foundation is glassrecyclingfoundation.org, and we spun up the Glass Recycling Foundation late in 2019 in order to start to take over the grant-making function that the industry had been pulling together through GPI and GRC, is now working through the GRF. We are in coordination with Will, and SERDC is on the technical advisory committee. It is the grant applications all go through technical advisory committee review before the GRF makes determination on grant making. The grants are being made. We've got a couple grants out in 2021 in Erie, Pennsylvania, and Chicago. And I can answer more questions about that later at the end of the webinar if anybody wants to know more. So thank you very much, and let's get to some of our panelists. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ben Pedigo, who is the recycling coordinator for Rumpke Recycling and representative of a couple of those gold stars and red stars on that map that I showed you. Ben, take it away.
Well, Scott, thank you very much. It's an honor to be part of this discussion, and I wore a special bow tie that from the Will Sager bow tie collection, vintage Tar Heel in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. What great work that you all are doing, and very pleased to be part of this discussion. Wanted to tell you about Rumpke very quickly. The Rumpke family roots in Ohio, Cincinnati, family-owned recycling waste hauler, landfill operator, and we run single-stream MRFs, and there are three reasons why we are very interested in recycling glass. Glass is infinitely recyclable. It's an amazing product, and we see that. The other is the landfill diversion. Just doing a little bit of research, it looks as if maybe the landfill tipping fees per ton in the Southeast may be hovering around $30 a ton. We want to keep that material out of the landfill. It's recyclable, and I think the third thing, the important is that our customers demand that, and we're going to be hearing from a great success story just about some grassroots recycling efforts and success with glass recycling in Orange County, North Carolina. This visual here kind of outlines what a single stream recycling process does. Now, the single stream offers a significant convenience for customers. And early on, Rumpke realized, and we teamed up with one of our sponsors here, Scott, MachineX Technologies. We work with MachineX. We have MachineX equipment in our materials recovery facilities, and work very closely with them. But the MRF of today, the single stream MRF, we want to increase efficiencies, and so what we do is we take that glass out very quickly in the process. And we want to make sure that that material is diverted. Now, MRFs right now are experiencing probably some of the strongest recycling markets in years. And, you know, our belief is that glass is a legacy material, and it has a very significant place in curbside recycling. And I know that Amy Wong, Sims, has very good success with managing glass as well. Now, I think Scott, just kind of fill in the some of the blanks on this, is that there is a, to your point, there is a contamination issue that occurs when glass is in a single stream facility. And so, Scott, what you had outlined in your visual, as you see to the right, that is material that Rumpke processes on the next level. And so there needs to be, with a MRF, some type of a MRF pre-clean system. We've had very good success with MachineX in that arena, in that that technology. And I just encourage MRF operators, and I encourage citizens to reach out to your MRF. Glass needs to be included in any collection. It's essential. We do about 5,000 tons a month of that material. And that material that you're looking at is about 75% glass. And what we do, and you see some visuals here, Rumpke invested approximately $10 million in a system that Bender Technologies out of Austria. And we are taking that single stream material, we're cleaning it, we are separating by size. We can optically sort and do optically sort. We work with Owens, Illinois on bottle glass. You see the bottom left there, you've got Flint and Amber. Those are going to go to bottle glass manufacturers. We do work with, in Defiance, Ohio, work with Johns Manville with fiberglass manufacturing. And you see the silo there in the center where we are a holding area for that material. We, you know, very much a circular economy. I know that the Glass Recycling Coalition has put together some great resources on where people can look to recycle. Just so glad to be a part of this, and thank you so much, and look forward to questions.
Thank you very much, Ben. I'm just going to remind everybody to put your questions in the question box as we go on. I think I think the best thing for us to do is to move through all the different presentations first, and then we'll gather to answer questions at the end. Ben mentioned Amy Wong from Sims Municipal Recycling. Amy is the Deputy General Manager for Sims Municipal Recycling, and also representative of some of those gold stars on the map that I presented earlier, and a member of our GRC certification committee. Amy, you might even be the chair of the committee as often as you and I get to talk about the GRC certification program. So next up is Amy from Sims.
Thank you, Scott, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, SERDC, for hosting this event. For those of you who are not familiar, Sims Municipal Recycling operates MRFs in the Northeast and in Florida. We're a member of the GRC, and I'm here to talk to you today about some challenges MRFs are facing, processing glass, the offtake partners that are available for glass, and what participation in GRC's MRF certification program can do to help MRFs and the communities they service to promote quality glass products. Ben talked about the recycling process and what a MRF does, so I won't go too much into detail here, But as a recap, most of the glass collection nationally happens at the curbside, and it is more commonly collected as single stream material. And that's where glass, metal, and paper and plastic are commingled together. And as Ben described earlier, that commingled material moves from a truck possibly to a transfer facility and then to a MRF, where its job is to separate that material into its markable grades as compressed blocks or even as loose material. And on the left is an image of a truck dumping recyclables, if you wanted to go back. And eventually that process separates material into paper, sold as bales, along with the plastic and metal. And the image on the right is glass that's brittle, and you'll see small fragments. Scott had a larger picture that showed metal, cork, film, and paper mixed with caps. And that small fraction material would need additional sortation equipment, which could mean more capital dollars to separate it into something that can be sold. The next slide. Yep. We understand that it can be a challenge for MRFs to sort small fraction material. And some of those challenges are bulleted here, like how glass is abrasive, can wear equipment down faster than anticipated. But the primary challenge for MRFs is that glass recycling requires additional separation equipment. That's because most MRFs don't produce a quality product that can be fed directly to furnaces unless they collect glass containers separately. Most often, MRF glass needs to go through a beneficiation process to separate out the metal, plastic, and fiber contamination. And depending on where the MRF is located and the volume of the material that it produces, and also the way a contract is structured with their client, the economics may not work in the favor for sending small fraction material to a beneficiation facility. And what may end up happening is that MRFs send their small fraction material to landfills for disposal or for use as daily cover. And then we lose that valuable or that in-demand resource. And knowing who the offtake partners is half the battle. And it's about making sure MRFs and the communities they service understand what their options are, even though it may not be the easiest option. So outside of landfills, the highest and best use for glass is to create a cullet that can be fed back into a furnace and then turned into a new glass product. And that's the image on the left. Glass can be cleaned up and ground for use as sandblasting material, or it can be used to create fiberglass to insulate homes or commercial spaces. It can be turned into foam glass or lightweight aggregate for use in construction projects. It can also be turned into ground glass pozzolan that's used as a substitute for fly ash in concrete. And last, as fill or drainage material in local construction projects. So MRFs have options. If MRFs or their communities want to learn more about the alternatives near them, and you've heard this before, they can go visit the GRC website to check out the glass map at glassrecycles.org/glass map. Also on the GRC website are tools for MRFs and communities to learn more about best management practices to help in their recovery efforts. You can read more about those improvements on the website, and that includes MRF configurations or how to remove glass contaminants with new equipment. And the GRC developed and launched the MRF certification program in 2019 with the intent to encourage and support the growth of quality glass products. And through this free program, we are incentivizing stakeholders to utilize the best practices for glass product recovery. And we made the process simple to incentivize MRFs to apply, and also easy for municipalities to adopt or use as a tool in their RFP or in their contracts to ensure a minimum glass standard is met. And to make it enticing for MRFs, we are recognizing them through GRC. They'll be prominently listed on our website and also in other industry publications. And most importantly, we want to provide communities with the confidence that their MRFs are doing the best that they can to create a product that can be used again and again. And the certification, it lasts for 3 years, and MRFs, as Scott mentioned before, can be awarded bronze, silver, gold, with the gold being the highest level. And when reviewing the applications, committee members may evaluate systems based on whether they accept glass, the quality produces, best management practices, and how they may have connected with the end markets other than landfills. The application is online, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But this is the in essence, second year, so in this version 2.0 of the application process, we included clarifications on how the certifications are awarded, and that's based on quality of glass. If the quality of glass falls slightly short, there are other metrics the committee members would consider, like technologies used, the types of end markets achieved, that could bump up the level awarded. We clarified what the acceptable end markets are, other than landfill applications, of course. And if the material that's not accepted by glass furnaces, we wanted to encourage MRFs to pursue the fines market to increase the likelihood that their glass will be used again. So our certification program targets MRFs with glass cleanup processes, and that can include drop-off programs, those that utilize manual sortation, and of course the mechanical equipment like trommels, disc screens, and air knives. And the metrics, again, evaluates the infrastructure and how that marries up to the best management practices with or without drop-off programs. Purity level achieved, because that may dictate where the glass may go, and the applicant's choice in their end markets for the glass that's produced. And over here, these slides will take you through the application process. And it's pretty simple. You can go to glassrecycles.org, and then on the tools menu, you can find the MRF glass certification link. And it's a two-step process. The first is filling out the application, and the second is conducting an audit on a 5 to 10 pound sample. And the application is pretty simple. It asks, does your MRF accept glass? What's the volume of material that's processed? You can check a box on the type of cleanup equipment that's utilized, and if you have an outlet for the glass. And over here on this slide, this is just an image of what you can see. It shows you the process for conducting a sample that where we need weights of non-glass residue measured and glass that's greater than and then less than 3/8 of an inch. All of this can be submitted online, and once the committee members receive the application, everything will be redacted. So the review process should be pretty fair. And MRFs, if you are awarded, you'll know within 3 to 4 weeks, and you'll be prominently listed on our website, and of course the trade publications here. And the program was launched back in 2019, and since then we've awarded a variety of certifications to MRFs, with the most recent with Mid-America Recycling, and that's the first gold MRF in Iowa, and SSR Balcones, and they are the first gold certified MRF in our Florida region. So thank you for your time, and we hope you all apply.
Thank you very much, Amy. And again, I'll just, as a reminder, I see some questions coming in. We're going to hold the question until all of our panelists are done the first time, but we're going to have some time for Q&A, so keep those questions coming in. And next up is Kira Laval, who is the Recycling Education and Outreach Coordinator for Orange County Solid Waste in North Carolina, and relatively new to her position, but Orange County is one of the jurisdictions that received GRC grants and support from the GRC and ongoing, well, which would then roll into the GRF grant process as well. But Orange County was one of the first jurisdictions to get some support from the GRC, and so welcome, Kira.
Hi, Scott, and thank you. I'm excited to be here and a part of the important glass conversations that are going on. So today I'll be talking about Orange County's Glass on the Side program. So in 2019, we conducted a recycling composition study, and as you can see here, commercial made up the majority of the glass stream. So almost 50% of what they were recycling is glass, and that leads to a potential total recovery of 500 tons of glass. And then the next two largest glass streams come from our drop-off sites, both our staffed and our unstaffed drop-off sites. And together, they contribute to a potential 500 tons in potential glass recovery. And then the next three smaller streams are our multifamily and our residential curbside, which have lower glass percentages. Next slide. So since the majority of the glass in our recycling program comes from commercial and they have the highest volume of glass, we wanted to focus our initial efforts there. So we started with bars and restaurants in the downtown area in Chapel Hill and Carborough. We started back in September of 2019. We set up 25 sites around Carborough and Chapel Hill, which in total serve 65 plus businesses by March. And now, as of June, we serve about 107 businesses in that downtown area. This program is very focused and requires a lot of outreach and intensive one-to-one relationship building with the restaurant owners and management. We require a lot of follow-up to make sure that the staff, if they're having a lot of turnover, are being trained on the differences between the mixed recycling and the glass carts. We have to send onboarding letters and follow-up letters to make sure that they're just keeping up with our program rules and expectations. We also install signs above the glass carts to help further differentiate between our mixed recycling and our glass-only carts. And we also do a lot of follow-up site visits, especially for sites that are having a lot of issues. If our drivers report a lot of contamination at the sites, maybe we'll do a reset, talk to those restaurants that are contributing to that site to make sure that they understand the differences between those two recycling carts. So at the start of our program, from November 2019 to June 2021, we've collected 86 tons of glass, and that is a little lower, but we had COVID closed bars and restaurants for a couple months. So I think from late March to June or July, we weren't collecting glass at all from any of the bars and restaurants since they were shut down. So in the spring of 2021, we continued to expand to the downtown area in Chapel Hill and Carborough. We added all of the eligible restaurants and bars that were left in the area. We had 25 additional bars and restaurants join the program with the help of our UNC student intern from the Eco Studio. She worked really hard to get all of the eligible restaurants and businesses on our program again, especially after COVID. You know, the last thing some people want to worry about is recycling. We again wanted to focus after adding all of the sites in the downtown area, focus on Hillsborough and other shopping centers in Orange County once we've finished the expansion in downtown. And the way we add new businesses to the program is by first paying them a visit or giving them a phone call to explain the program and see if they're interested. And if they are interested in participating, we send them an onboarding letter to explain our program expectations and the rules, and we follow up by delivering some carts and installing a sign above the carts for glass. We kind of glassify the carts, so all over they'll have stickers and writing with Sharpie to really make sure that people know these carts are for glass and glass only. And then afterwards, we make sure that the management and staff at the restaurants understand the difference between the carts. And then follow up, we leave them alone for a little bit and then follow up with another visit or phone call to make sure everything's going well, if they have any questions or if they've come across any issues with it. And we may follow up sooner than later if our driver does report any contamination or issues with the site. Then we've also had a separate glass collection at our staffed drop-off sites. So we started with 2 sites back in November of 2019, and we kicked this off for America Recycles Day that November. We were able to repurpose some of the old roll-off containers and use them for glass for both Orange County and Durham County, and we want to give a big thanks to the GRC for their help with that. We put up banners on the containers in advance for residents to kind of know what was coming, to prepare their glass separately to be recycled and why we were doing the program. And then once the glass containers were delivered, we had staff and volunteers on site during busy hours at our waste and recycling centers to provide residents with education on why we were doing this program, how they could participate, and how it was beneficial. We announced this throughout our solid waste e-newsletter, in several local newspapers, and using our social media platforms to let a lot of the public know that this was widely available in Orange County. And then in May, we expanded to our remaining 3 staffed sites. So these are some examples of advertisements that we did in our e-newsletter, social media, and local newspapers. And then on the right side, you see the 2 different types of residential educational flyers that we handed out. So in the first round, for our first 2 roll-offs, we handed out pledge cards where we would talk to residents, and this was before COVID, so people, weren't as scared if you walked up and tried to talk to them. We handed out pledge cards, let them know about the program and how they could participate. And then towards the end, some of the outreach that we had to do with COVID, we wanted to provide some more informational flyers in case, people weren't as willing to engage or have a conversation when we were on site. So the bottom handout kind of lays out the what, why, and how of the Glass on the Side program to get residents involved with recycling their glass separately. So our regional partners, we have partnerships with Alamance and Durham County, and they're required to provide us with some high quality glass loads with less than 2% contamination. Our neighbor in Alamance collects from 1 staff site and 1 unstaffed site, and Durham County, who has joined the program after Alamance, collects from 3 of their 4 staff sites. They bring it over to us, and then we haul to Strategic Materials in Wilson, North Carolina, we average around 15 tons per trip in our 30-yard roll-offs. Later on in October, we added to the remaining 4 unstaffed sites in Orange County. So now we were operating at all 9 of our recycling sites, the 5 staffed waste and recycling centers, and then our 4 unstaffed drop-off sites. We had, again, volunteers on site for outreach during the first weekend that the containers were dropped off, and handed out the how, what, and why flyer to any residents that came by to recycle on that weekend. At first, we had some issues with illegal dumping, which can happen with any unstaffed recycling sites. So to kind of remediate that issue, we installed bars, as you can see in that picture on the bottom, to all of the openings in all of the glass containers. And this really helped reduce contamination significantly. We had some negative feedback just from a couple of residents that says, hey, now it takes me a lot longer to put my glass in the carts. I wasn't the one to, put any contamination in there in the first place. But overall, it's helped way more than it's hurt, because contamination in glass can be a significant issue. And then since then, so this is where we stored our glass previously, and previously before that, it held our compost. Next slide. And since then, we have built a glass pad using the money from our NC DEECS grant in 2019. We previously kept tires on this pad, but we were able to repurpose it for glass, and we added some jersey barriers around the side of the pad, and we started using the pad just a couple months ago in May. So going over some overall outcomes from the program, since the start in November of 2019 to June of 2021, we've been able to collect 977 tons and send that to Strategic Materials. Most of the glass is collected from our staffed sites, as you can see in the graph on the side, and then the rest from our neighbors in Alamance and Durham. That makes up the majority of the glass that we collect. We receive around $20 a ton for our high quality and very low contaminated glass. We do require some minor cleanup before delivery to Strategic. And then we self-haul from Orange County to Wilson, North Carolina. It's about 160 miles round trip. And again, we average around 15 tons of load on these trips. So going forward and continuing to expand the glass program, as I mentioned before, we want to assess the feasibility of expanding to Hillsborough and the remaining bars and restaurants in Chapel Hill and Carrboro, and then the outlying shopping centers within Orange County. We're also looking to further the use of our existing sites, so our 9 sites, the waste and recycling centers and our unstaffed drop-off sites, and getting more residents to utilize those already existing. And then potentially for the following year, we would look more towards the multi-unit housing and apartment recycling streams and see how we can set up separate glass collection in that capacity. We have 3 pilots currently operational at 3 different apartment complexes around the county, and those are doing pretty well. With apartments, there is a lot of turnover, so it does require some consistent education for residents and apartment managers to identify the 2 different recycling carts, which one is for glass and which one is for mixed recycling. But so far, our pilot programs have been pretty successful, but we do not have any intentions on having a separate curbside collection in Orange County. And that is it for me. Thank you so much. And I look forward to answering some of the questions that have popped up in the chat.
Thank you very much, Kira. There's some really great information there on the program in Orange County and in the North Carolina area nearby. All right, so we've got several good questions. We're doing well on time. I'm going to try to kind of put a couple of these questions together for all of our panelists. So if Ben and Amy will turn their cameras and microphones back on. The first couple of questions I think are really for Ben and Amy, and then I've got 1 or 2 for Kira, and then 1 for for all the panelists. The first couple of questions came in about MRF and contamination and equipment. You know, what are some of the top contamination issues that you see coming through single stream in glass? What's kind of remaining in that glass pile? I'll note, as I kind of frame up the question myself, is like, as we look at the system, I have taken an interesting turn to suggest that the glass pile in a MRF is really an indication of how well the other parts of the MRF system are operating, because what you get in the glass pile through the negative sort is what's left in a typical MRF. What you see in the glass pile is indicative of how well the other systems are operating. So, one of the questions was about, what are the most common characteristics of the contamination that you see? And then the question that pairs with that is, what are some of the most cost-effective steps that a MRF can take to clean up that contamination? So I'll go to Ben or Amy first.
Well, I'll start off, Scott. I think that a single stream MRF on the glass side, I think you're going to see a lot of paper, small pieces of paper. And, I think that any single stream MRF is going to have a pre-clean system. And, again, I mentioned MachineX. They've done a lot of work for us, and they would be a great resource on, retrofitting a cleanup system, trommel, air knives, those types of things.
Right. And SIMS operates dual stream MRFs, and it really depends on the material that's accepted in your program. So you have to understand what that inbound material is first, before you figure out the type of equipment that you can put in place or the way that it's configured. And for us, we see in New York City, because it's all rigid containers, they think that a pen is recyclable, or a number of other like vials and cork, and it seems like plastic, they'll put it in. But we have a lot of metal contamination and a lot of small plastic contamination in the mix, and even tubes. In the way that we're structured, because we process so much material, about 10 to 12,000 tons of this small fraction material a month, that we have a beneficiation plant that can take it and account for those contaminated items, like the metals that we extract and put back into the marketplace. Then there's the plastic and the paper, and then what you have left is like finer material. So it's really about knowing your inbound material and then figuring out that process for it.
So Amy, in New York City with the dual stream, the consumers are putting out two different bins. The paper is mixed. The paper and cardboard, I'm assuming, is separated from the rigid containers. So you don't necessarily have a lot of shredded paper like Ben sees at Rumpke,
right?
First off, right? But
right.
Still, some of the smaller items, pens and caps and tubes and straws, and some of those things might make their way
and
through.
Plastic bags, really, because New York City collects everything in plastic bags, so you'll have a lot of film fragments within the mix. So it really is about understanding how it's collected, what you have in front of you, and then figuring out that system that works out best. And keep in mind, material change all the time. So what is applicable today may not be applicable in the next 5 years as people are getting more innovative.
Yeah. And Ben, you talked about the shredded paper, and I've seen that myself in a couple other MRFs that I've visited, is that when you get to the point where you're taking the glass out, the number one thing that I see coming out of the pre-clean process is the shredded paper, because it gets all mixed up in there together, and the pre-clean is really not that elaborate of a, we're not talking about that elaborate of a machine, right? It's vacuuming and trommel.
Yeah, and I think Amy had a wonderful point. You've got to figure it out. It's not an option to drop glass, and so the charge for Sims, the charge for Rumpke, and the other MRF processors is let's figure this out. We want things to be convenient, and there's an education component that it was just so nice to hear about Orange County and the great work that's being done. But Scott, we just got to recycle glass.
Yep. Thanks, Ben. Let me switch to a question for Kira. Really two things that I think stood out in your presentation, not just the drop off, containers and things like that, but really how quickly are the bars and restaurants taken to the commercial bar and restaurant, program? I mean, is that picking up some steam? I mean, certainly with COVID, and they had it was a rough year for on-premise accounts last year, but I would, a lot of those places can be fairly glass intensive, with beer bottles and liquor and wine and things of that nature. So I was going to ask you about that. Also, the second question is, I really applaud the use of your facilities as almost like a hub and spoke for the surrounding communities, because instead of each county, making their own separate trip to strategic materials, they're gathering at your place. And how much more interest are you getting, from nearby counties to bring their material to you?
Yeah, so to answer your first question, it's definitely been a little bit of a roller coaster for bars and restaurants this last year and a half. So, we understand that recycling is probably the last thing that they're worried about. But there are always, some folks that are really jazzed up about recycling, no matter what time it is. So some people are a lot easier to get on board and are very willing to train their staff, and kind of already have a lot of sustainability practices in set, whether they may also collect their food waste. So adding, an extra educational component to train their staff with isn't a big deal for them. So I think really it just depends on the restaurant and bar itself. Some require a little more persuasion than others, but once you see like, oh, hey, everyone else on the street is doing it, why aren't I? I don't want to be the one guy left out. I need to start recycling my glass separately too. I think it's become a real community thing, and so the more bars and restaurants that we have on board, they don't want to be left out. And I think that's been one of the most beneficial things about this program is Orange County is really community-based and community-driven. So once you see that happen and take off in your community, yeah, you want to be a part of it. And then for the second part of your question, yeah, it's been really nice being able to have a partnership with our neighboring Alamance and Durham counties. And as I haven't heard of any other interest in people kind of collaborating with us for us to collect their glass and have us haul it over to Strategic. I am aware that Chatham County, which is also fairly close to Orange County, does collect their glass, not in a commercial capacity, but at their recycling centers. And I believe they have 12 around Chatham County where they collect glass, and they don't haul it to Strategic themselves, but they contract someone to pick it up from their recycling sites and bring it over to Strategic for them.
Great, thank you. Amy, the next couple of questions that I had in were, kind of detailed questions about the certification program. One was, how is the quality judged? Do they need to identify their end markets? And, about renewal or, certainly, and I had to be, I'll admit, the first time I was doing a webinar with Amy on the certification program, I errantly said that you have to actually send in a sample. Amy, we don't want people to actually send in boxes of their MRF glass, do they? And so the frequency of, renewal, I think there's just a couple questions about, how that material is being judged, and, it is a bit on the honor system.
Yes.
Right.
Certifications for 3 years, and as we approach the end of your certification or when you were awarded, we'll notify you that you may want to reconsider applying, and that'll be based on the new application process. I think I saw something where someone asked if you have to, how frequently do you have to sample? It's just the one sample, but what's great about the GRC is that we are in a small family of glass recyclers, and we know the quality. So if we hear of any degradation in the quality of the glass, we'll just kind of reach out and ask for something ad hoc. But it's generally a one-time sample, and it's on that honor system. It's self-reported, and you submit it in, and it's based on weighing the material for the procedures. So you'll grab a 5-pound sample to 10-pound. You'll weigh so you'll separate it into all non-glass residue, glass that is greater than 3/8 of an inch, and then glass that's less than 3/8 of an inch. And then we'll combine the percentages and figure out where your glass purity is.
Okay, thanks. There was another question about what other incentives or benefits do you get for certification other than being recognized on the website? Certainly, every presentation that we do that talks about the GRC, as those red stars add up, we keep identifying, MRFs that meet the certification. But let's talk about actually being able to market your glass. At the end, certainly that's a benefit that I think, comes out of the certification process.
No, sure. And then I think someone also asked a question about if you have to list your offtake partners. You don't have to list who they are, but put the market that you're presently supplying your glass to, whether it's for ground glass pozzolan or to a beneficiation facility 100% or some other outlet. But the idea is to make sure that the MRFs who are certified have access to these offtake partners. Or maybe the result of your award will, spark some type of idea with some of these offtake partners. So you could have maybe a complementary service or a new business development opportunity for you, where, bottle-to-bottle glass doesn't exist, because we want that bottle-grade glass here, if you can produce it.
If I could just add something to this point, Rumpke has received contracts based on recycling glass, so it's very much an important component. And I tell you, Amy, you've done a great job with that certification process and the GRC. That I think it's very, very important. I know Marissa Segundo with Resource Recycling Systems has I've done a lot of work on promoting that, trade publications, those types of things. I think it's got a buzz. I think it's really been a big interest.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to pause for just a second and see if Will, or how are we doing on time? We've got some more questions here. Do you want us to go through these, or do we need to wrap because we're at the hour?
We're booked until 10 after.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can keep going.
We got 10
all right.
minutes. Do save them just a little bit of time. Closing comments to you, please.
Okay, sure. Well, let's see if we can tackle one or two or more of these questions. I see a question about export markets. I've been in the glass industry now for 2 years at GPI. Generally, we don't see too much exporting of glass. Certainly, glass was never exported for recycling. Certainly, after processing, maybe there's some anecdotal examples of export markets. I don't know if either of you, any of the panelists want to speak to that, but that's generally what I understand.
We've been approached about exporting glass to countries overseas, and it just depends on where that transportation cost is to the value of the glass.
Yeah.
So there are explorations for maybe glass used in furniture applications like a countertop and things like that for other products.
Okay. But certainly, for the panelists, it's not like the China National Sword was part of, glass was never part of that. It was not part of all that. Usually the glass markets are in North America for North America, and I've heard of some export to Central America or maybe some South American markets and things like that from different.
And you kind of hope too, Scott, that the China ban on materials is not a cover for dropping glass, because glass is something that by and large is handled within the confines of the US, just based on the hauling efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. And certainly there's some questions here about reuse programs, and certainly that's something that we can talk about again, certainly as far as the industry is concerned. The use of glass, all uses of glass are good. It's infinitely recyclable, it's reusable, it's one of the highest value reusable containers. We still have ball jars, or food jars that get reused often and never, don't get recycled because they stay in our cabinets and our refrigerators with other things for some time. And so we'd be happy to put together another program on reuse and things of that nature. There's a question about the uptake on glass crushing machines. I think there's some confusion about some of the glass crushing machines, and I think there's a couple different ones to mention. There's reverse vending machines that often come with bottle bills. I think you probably see some of those in New York. But then there's also, I hear and see advertised crushers, grinders, for crushing individual locations. I don't know that that's very recommended for a municipality or a county or something like that to try to crush their own glass into sand. Obviously, in certain end markets, in certain applications, or if you're on an island or if you're at the end of the road, you may have harder access to markets, and you may be able to use some of it for beach replenishment or things like that. But I think there's a misconception that it's actually sand. Sand is made, sand is used to make, silica sand is used to make glass, not beach sand or construction sand. And then when you crush it at the end, it's not really sand. You can't really use it the same way as sand, although there are sandblasting and other applications and end markets that do use the fines and materials, right? I think one of the things that I've learned over the course of the past year also is, even if you're not making cullet, the material, the fines and the materials that go to aggregate does have to be clean, right? It's not like you're sending a lot of contamination over with the aggregate to the aggregate and foam, glass, and pozzolan makers. they need
Yeah,
clean materials.
specs are very high with fiberglass for sure.
All right. Let's see. Well, I think what I want to do here is just give each of the panelists an opportunity to wrap up or a closing comment. And Will, I think there's some questions that we can probably take offline and try to make sure that we get answers for very specific market issues. There's some questions about communities that want to do programs similar to what Kira is doing, and I assume Orange County is more than happy to consult and give advice to other communities that are looking. But based on some of the questions that I see coming in, it may be that some of these questions, very specific community issues, need to be addressed one-on-one, and so we'll work with SERDC to make sure that we address all these questions. But let me give each of our panelists a chance to just wrap up and say any closing comments. Kira, why don't we start with you? We'll go in reverse order.
Okay, yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this webinar. I really enjoyed it, and I hope it was informational and serves as a good example of how this program can be successful on a county level. And like Scott said, I'm more than happy to serve as a resource for any other municipality that's looking to start a program like this or has any questions about how we started or the benefits or challenges that we've come across throughout this process. So we can, I don't know if our contact information is available after the webinar, if questions will all be directed towards SERDC directly, but again, I'm happy to help and provide answers to any questions you guys may have for county specific glass recycling.
Thanks. And Amy?
Oh, I just wanted to say that the MRF certification program is just a tool that communities and MRFs can use, or even offtake partners, to help ensure that they have a quality glass product. But please also join SERDC if you haven't, because that's your community that you can reach out to and get support from, and also the GRC as well. And you should reach out to either group to answer your questions about glass recovery.
All right, thank you. And Ben?
Yeah, Scott, SERDC has done a wonderful job. In fact, I've signed up for all of these webinars. What a great resource. I'm honored to be part of this discussion. What a great panel. What a wonderful group.
Okay. Thank you. And on behalf of the Glass Packaging Institute, I can also just say that from the industry standpoint, we are making investments in communities. We're providing grants and material through the GRC and the GRF, and we've started pilots in various communities across the country, and we're looking to scale those things up. In addition, we're looking for opportunities to invest in MRFs if that's the appropriate thing that needs to be done to help with get some equipment going. And we're working with SERDC as a regional partner to identify the places where we can make investments in the Southeast and improve glass recycling and get that material to the plants. So with that, Will, I think we'll hand it back over to you. And on behalf of the panelists, at least, and GPI, I also want to thank ISRI and MachineX for sponsoring this glass session.
Thank you, Scott. And we echo the appreciation to our panelists and to our sponsors, ISRI and MachineX, for making this possible. We will work on the questions that we didn't get to and circulate those answers. The webinar will be posted by the end of the week or the first of next week at the latest. You can see in your chat the link to that if you want to save that. And I'll remind you, our next session will be covering metals. We'll be here at September 1st. We do move to 1 o'clock that day. I look forward to seeing you then, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.